So I want to talk about a little bit more. I want to bring out one more little point, and then I'm going to go through the hurdle asana and the different positions, and sort of give you a different perspective on them. But the first thing I want to talk about is the one little detail that I feel like you need to be aware of in order to pull everything together in terms of making it work a little bit more smoothly and giving you some more drive through the hurdle. So when we look at your hurling the other day and the run through, then let's bring that a little tighter. So as you run through and you come up into the hurdle, right? Everything is looking good. So right here at takeoff, so in terms of your shape and stability, that's there. Okay, so you're not collapsing through this point. Everything is staying where it should stay. So we're past that now. I think you know how to get there. But what's happening as you take off is something that you're not the only person that do it. I see a lot of hurdlers do it. I won't even, I could show you examples, but you just have to trust me. And if you want me to show you examples of pretty good hurdlers that do it, then I'll show it to you. But what's happening here at your takeoff is you're going from, when you're running up to the hurdle, your foot lands, and then that same side hip, the support side hip, you push forward. So you drive your hips forward, okay? And that's what you're supposed to do. And that driving your hip forward, is partly what causes the opposite side knee and foot to come forward. So your habit when you take off, even now that you're stable and everything, is you're not driving that takeoff hip forward. As soon as your foot lands, pretty much you're into driving your knee up, right? And driving your knee up without driving your hip forward is not what you want to do, because you lose drive into the hurdle. Okay. Now I'm going to show you. I'm the mad scientist, and so I had, I was looking at this for a couple days and trying to sort of like think my way through what I was seeing. And so this is kind of what is going on. So of course I went to Home Depot and bought some stuff, and so basically what I've done is I've created a system of pulleys with a lever, right? So I have a pulley here and a pulley here and a pulley here, and it's attached, my foot is attached to a line that's basically doing this, going around, and is attached to this pole, which is attached to the ground. And this basically is sort of in the universe depiction of what's going on inside your body, and what we want to happen. Okay, so basically what happens for you, so the line right now, the line that is running around everything is tight. It has tension in the line. Everything is tight, right? So if I want you to understand that this white stick represents my opposite side leg, okay? So you can kind of see. So this is my opposite side hip, my left hip. It would be my takeoff hip, which would be your right hip, okay? This is the only way I could really show you what's going on. So while you're seeing this, understand that this is representing the leg that I'm standing on, not the leg that's bent, okay? So if at takeoff I only drive my knee up, then what happens here is, I don't know if you can see it, I hope you can, but all the tension in the line just goes away. So now I have a line, that is more like this, and then it's all this slack down here, and then it's kind of up, and then it's all this slack hanging, and then it's attached to my foot. So there's no tension in the line, right? And so consequently, there's nothing that is driving my hip forward. Now my hip will come forward basically from momentum. So if I drive my knee up, then my hip will kind of follow, right? But it won't be driving me forward the same way it is when I'm running, okay? And so what we want is that the act of, so I've got the lines back tight now, the act of driving my hip forward, and it's not just driving your whole pelvic area forward, it's driving the stance leg hip forward. The leg that you're standing on, driving that hip forward will cause the knee and foot of the opposite leg to come up, okay? And we've talked about this before back in college and everything, but this is kind of what we want. We want the knee lift and drive into the hurdle to be happening because we're driving our stance leg hip at the hurdle, okay? We land, boom, and then we drive that hip forward. So, rather than me standing the way I am, here or whatever, it's basically I've drove my hip forward, and then, my torso is up here now. And my knee would be basically doing this. But it got there 100% from me driving my hip forward, because there's like these lines of tension running through your body that kind of basically are doing what this contraption is that I made. And so in this instance, all the tension in all the lines is still there. It didn't go away because I'm driving the tension forward correctly. And that's how we want the lead leg to come forward, okay? We don't want to just be back here, landing and then just lifting up this lead leg. Let's see if this is the one. Let's go back a little bit more. And lifting up. So we don't want the line to just go slack right there, because we always want to have that, that tensegrity and that tension in our body, at all times. Okay? So that's the one thing that I wanted to point out. So what you need to think about is everything that we worked on still applies, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more also, the yoga positions. But to make the whole thing fire off, again, we want to come into the hurdle, and of course Merritt is really great at doing this, but you want to come into the hurdle, and here we want to drive that hip forward, this stance leg hip, we want to drive it forward, which will cause this to come up, right? That's how we want to get to here. That's how we want to get to the first yoga position, which is chair pose. We want to get to chair pose by driving our stance leg hip forward at the hurdle, okay, as aggressively as possible. And what that'll do is it'll give you like big time thrust through the hurdle, but your lead leg will be quicker also, because you won't be trying to manually use it. It'll just sort of be reacting and being driven. So it'll be even quicker than it already is, and it's pretty quick right now. So in terms of, just in terms of the yoga positions that we went through, I want to point that out so that it's a little bit more clear in your head about what we're actually doing. So that's the first position, chair pose, right? Now, what I keep saying is this is putting you in the position that we want to be in, but the way that we get to this position, of course, is not to squat down, right? But if you look at this position, this would be the position that you want to be in when you have driven your your stance leg hip. When you've driven it at the hurdle, then your lead leg would be bent and you would be driving into the hurdle like this, right? So basically it's that, right? These two things are the same, right? It's just a matter of, when we're practicing the hurdle asanas, you really can't do it in the same way. But basically what we're doing when we hit position 1 in hurdle asana, and so now you can think about it, is that we're practicing our knee coming up into position. But also what we can't do over here on this side, in doing this, we can't practice the act of driving our hip at the hurdle. So we can't practice that to get into this position. But mentally, I want you to understand that when you do that, let's go back a little bit and skip this guy back. So mentally, I want you to understand that these two things are the same, okay? So let's move it forward a little bit, move it forward a little bit there. Those two things are doing the same thing. So again, and over here on the right, what I'm doing is I am pushing my stance leg hip forward. I'm not lifting my knee. I want you to know that. I'm pushing my hip forward, and so I'm getting a lot of knee lift from doing that. More than enough to get over this 39-inch hurdle that I got in front of me. And you can see that I'm basically creating, basically the same angle that I'm creating in my drill. I'm basically creating that angle. So that's position number 1, and you're well aware of it. So now you can kind of rethink it when you're practicing it, that this is actually what's going on. It's chair pose, but rather than doing it the way the yoga people do it, which is to go down, it's chair pose up. That's your takeoff. And what causes chair pose to happen, what causes the lead knee to drive up, is the stance hip driving forward. Okay, so we got that. So then we go to position 2, which is, let's go there, position 2, which is Uttanasana. Let's find Uttanasana. Okay, this is chair Uttanasana. Let's see, there we go. That's chair and Uttanasana, right? So again, when we're practicing Uttanasana, it's the exact same thing we're doing and the exact same feeling, but what we're really doing with Uttanasana when we're doing it in that way is we're basically practicing getting into this position, right? So these two things are the same, okay? So if I take this and get rid of it and get rid of that, so we get rid of that guy, and then we put our floor over here, so then we basically have the same thing. We have, now you can kind of see Uttanasana, right? Really, you can see it. So if I took this guy, just playing around a little bit, and let's see, we rotate it this way, good, and then we move it a little bit. Let's clear that, do this, go here, here, and get rid of all that, and put our floor down, right? So that's Uttanasana, plain and simple. Get rid of that guy. That's Uttanasana. That's the second phase of what we do, right? That's this. That's this. Those two things are the same. That and this. So again, I just want to point out to you why we're doing what we're doing. So we're just practicing this position, okay? Again, if I go through this and let it rise, so, our Uttanasana, we swing, we either do it this way or we do it, this way, right? But it's still, that's just Uttanasana. That's the same thing, right? So you understand. And then we go from there into what's actually called bear pose, which is basically a modified version of the chair pose, which I'm not going to get into. But I just want you to see, visually that, these things that we're doing, they relate exactly to the positions that you would be in going over the hurdle. Uttanasana down, or let's move this back. Let's go Uttanasana up, right? So again, now the thing is, okay, so how do we get from this, right, to this position? And again, all that's really happening, I want to point this out because this is pretty cool. Let me go back to chair pose up. So when I'm driving my stance leg hip at the hurdle, right, boom, then I go into this position. So if we think about what's going on here, in terms of geometry, this is really all that's happening. So we have this triangle, right, that's made by us driving our hip up into position. So when so this is chair pose. The second position, which is Uttanasana, is basically this triangle rotating. Let's do that again. But sometimes it don't work out the way I want it to. Basically what's happening is this triangle we're causing it to rotate this way, right? Clockwise. And we're doing that by pushing off the ground, right? I told you have to make sure that you push off the ground to get this thing rotating. Otherwise, it'll just fly off into space at this same angle, right? Because once you leave the ground, there's nothing that's going to cause it to tip forward that you can really do in the air. You have to do it while you're in contact with the ground. So you're pushing off the ground, which is causing the tipping, and you're also, throwing your arm out there, which is adding some more weight. So basically all those things are causing this triangle to rotate clockwise. And so if we imagine this triangle with, a hinge down here, so as we drove our knee up, the hinge is here, and when that triangle starts to tip clockwise, then what would happen if there was a hinge is it would go in the opposite direction, right? So that hinge would go this way as the triangle goes that way. And so that's kind of how we end up into this position. Goodness. Move that. That's how we end up into that position. Geometry speaking, it's not that you ever take this leg, this leg, and bring it from here and swing it up. It's just driving that hip forward, which causes this to happen. So we created that triangle, and then we tip that triangle forward, and in doing so, this hinge right here that is hanging on to that triangle opens up. So we end up with this, which is that, right? Same thing. Okay? So that's basically, in terms of angles and geometry and levers and pulleys and whatever, this is basically what's happening out there, or what we want to happen out there on the track as we go over the hurdle, right? And so if we go back and look at, your run through again. Let's go here. All right, let's go forward. So we think about it differently now, right? So we're creating that triangle. Every time you push forward, you're creating that triangle to some degree. Even this one, it's a wider or more open triangle, but still that act of pushing that hip forward creates that triangle, right? And so at our takeoff, we want to push that hip. So this is the white, let me do it backwards. This is the white stick that I was holding, right? And so we want to be pushing that stick forward. So we want to be pushing that hip forward, right? Boom. Which would bring us up into this position, which you kind of end up there anyway, but you're following your knee. So from here, we're good. So now we're into chair pose, and we have that triangle with the hinge hanging off of it. And so we tilt that triangle forward, which causes that hinge to open up, right? And so now the triangle tilted forward, and so now the triangle is more like this, and that hinge, which was down here when the triangle tilted forward, came here. And so that's what we end up with, okay? So that is a good Uttanasana. Right there is, if I show you what you do on the ground, Uttanasana down, that's fine. So boom, we're here, chair pose, Uttanasana down, but it's Uttanasana up, right? So now we can both visualize exactly what's happening. So all this is fine. The only thing we just need to make happen is right here. What do we do to cause this knee to come up? And I think that it helps if we draw a correlation, but with the knee. The knee doesn't do it for me. For me, it helps to draw a correlation between the stance hip and the foot, right? So if I get here and I push my hip forward, and that's going to bring my foot up, right? So by pushing my hip forward is how I'm getting my foot up. Because the bottom line is, you're not concerned, no hurdler is really, with getting their knee up. They're concerned with getting their foot up over the hurdle. That's the deal. So for me, because intuitively the concern is I got to get my lead leg foot up over the hurdle, right? So then it's just a matter of, how do I do that? Do I do that by physically bringing my foot up there, right? Swinging my knee up, which is really me just thinking about bringing my foot up. Am I doing it on the swing leg side? Or am I going to get my foot up here? Gosh, this thing is driving me crazy. Am I going to get my foot to go here by pushing my hip forward? So you can do it either way, but one way is going to be much more powerful and carry more velocity into and through the hurdle, right? So again, for me, in my practicing it and trying to think it through, I think it's very intuitive to think about that hip and this foot. That hip is how I get this foot up. As I'm running up to the hurdle and I'm thinking, okay, I want to get my foot up into the Uttanasana position, into the chair pose position or whatever, I'm going to get it there by driving my hip forward, right? So when you do that, you're going to be just fine. You're going to be just fine in terms of everything else, because, before we had a few issues, in that, like right here now, this is basically, you're perfectly aligned and you're stable, because this is not changing as this force goes through your body. You're still staying aligned and stable, right? Now before, not only did we have you driving your knee up, but then we were unstable through here, so driving that knee up in this way was causing all this to collapse back there, and then all this so everything was collapsing because nothing was stable. So we don't have that anymore. All we have now is the residual of your habit of driving your knee up, and you can see it a little even more clearly when you look at it from the front, because this was, a really nice run through. I mean, that lead leg is looking really, really good. And so, I got no complaints about that. I just want it to happen differently, because if I get hypercritical and look at everything, then I can see, you see the position that you push off here, you push your hip forward, and then right here, you're already turning yourself to position yourself to go ahead and favor this side of your body. You know, and we've talked about that before. So you already know, okay, I got to get that foot up there, so I'm kind of twisting and lifting on that side, right? Rather than driving this hip over here forward at the hurdle, which would cause that knee to come up, right? So that's what we want to do. So you can kind of see how you're setting it up. So in setting it up, you're setting it so you're kind of not aggressively running through the hurdle. You can't, because you're kind of doing some setup to get yourself in position to have enough time to get that leg up there, right? If you don't try to do it on the left side of your body, but just go ahead and right here, let me enlarge this a little bit and get my tool. So we're talking right here, this hip right here. Drive that thing at the hurdle. Boom. At takeoff. Drive that guy at the hurdle. That's what you want to be focused on. And you want to be thinking in the back of your mind or whatever that driving that guy forward, it's kind of moved over, driving that guy forward right there is going to make this guy come up really fast. All right? That's how we get there. Boom. So right now you can see it's sort of following everything, right? It's all about the hip, and you know, and you're still hitting your positions once you do. That's a really nice Uttanasana too. But you'll hit it even quicker and easier if you drive that hip forward. And then the other thing that driving that hip forward will cause is that everything will come through cleaner. So you know, everything that kind of happens coming through here will come through cleaner. It'll come through cleaner, right? So so there you go. I just wanted to point that stuff out to you. You know, just stating in no uncertain terms that everything is definitely looking better, and I'm really excited about where everything is right now. And I think just the better you understand what's going on, then the better you'll be able to make everything, tune everything up and get it to where you want it to be. Okay, so hopefully this will help solidify the things that we were working on while you were here, and we can you can go ahead and start practicing these things with a little bit more awareness and understanding over the next few weeks, and you will definitely improve.